We have five of us.
Huh?
Four, we have five of us.
Yeah, we can start. Tom's not coming.
Right. So it's, Chris, it's up, right? Okay, good evening. This is the regular board meeting for October 22nd, 2020. It is 6:01. Can I have roll call, please?
Mr. Gentry.
Here.
Mr. Garrett.
Here.
Mr. Troy.
Here.
Mr. Quagliano.
Here.
Mrs. Melendi.
Here.
Mrs. Iarino. Mr. Craddy.
Okay, there is a quorum. Item 2 is closed session. I'd like to make a motion to go into closed section at 6:02 as indicated and enumerated in our agenda.
Second.
Second from Ms. Melendi. We have roll call.
Mr. Quagliano.
Yes.
Mr. Craddy. Mrs. Melendi.
Yes.
Mr. Garrett.
Yes.
Mr. Gentry.
Yes.
Mr. Troy.
Yes.
Mrs. Iarino.
Okay, we will be in closed session. We will come back up by 7 o'clock for our regular session. Okay, we are out of closed session. It is 7:01. Can we have roll call?
Mr. Gearing,
Here.
Mrs. Maiorino,
Here.
Mr. Cogliano,
Here.
Mr. Corretti, Mr. Troy,
Here.
Mr. Gentry,
Here.
Mrs. Melendi.
Here.
Okay. Quorum. There are no actions out of closed session, so we'll move to item 4, which is the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 5 is public comment. We have in person first. One in person. Okay. Okay, Mr. James Rojek? Yes. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we're gonna, try to, 3 minutes is a time.
3 minutes?
I'll try to
Okay.
let you know.
No, I'll try to keep it brief.
No problem. No.
You know, just wanted to come to this meeting. I'm, taxpayer and a parent in this school district. And my youngest of 4 kids is an 8th grader, at Heinemann, and, very concerned with how this whole getting the kids back to school is gone, as far as, why you couldn't have come up with some kind of plan that could have safely gotten kids back at school at the beginning of the year when the weather was fine and the cases were down. And even now, I mean, while there might be some increases in cases being reported, there's not really the significant increase in serious health effects. And, I know we got a balance between, the COVID and the numbers, but then there's also the balance of, what's in the best interest of the kids in this school district, both in the short term and the long term. And, as a parent, I don't think remote learning and fully remote learning and in the manner it's being done right now is what's in the best interest, both academically, socially, and mentally for the kids in this school district. And I would just hope that, when trying to factor in the decisions, that it can't all be just based on some COVID numbers or some guidelines by the state of Illinois, and start really thinking about what's best for the kids, both in the short term and long term, and especially when there's a significant amount of families that would like to have their kids in school learning the way they're supposed to be and not sitting on a Chromebook in their bedroom at home, where they're getting, arguably not the best education that they can be. So, I just wanted to get that out there just so that you guys can hear from concerned parents who, wanted our kids to at least start back in August. We're hopeful that they would at least start a hybrid coming up soon, and then to get, the notification at 5:05 today that, that's being pushed back again. And arguably, what are the numbers that are going to be acceptable to actually get kids back at school? Or are we going to keep doing the same thing of pushing it every 2 weeks? Because, there was a few more cases in this county, but are there really identifiable benchmarks to actually safely say we can get our kids back at school? So just wanted to voice those concerns and hope that you guys could factor that in with everything else when you're making the decisions and what's truly best for the kids, now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for coming. Appreciate it. Okay. Mr. Armstrong, are you guys alternate, or are you going to read them all?
I think I got them all tonight.
Okay, you got them all, so go ahead.
Okay, our first comment tonight came from Kim Secady. Good evening, all. As we all know, now the numbers that everyone predicted would happen are happening. Why were kids sent back for a week during a time numbers were increasing? This move changed the daily schedules of hundreds of kids. Now, as we move backward, what schedule will be used going forward? The first remote schedule we were on provides a better education for all than what we are using now. If and when we move back to remote, please look at putting the remote plan in place that we have been using until this week. It gives back the structure kids need, breaks up their day with live and asynchronous, and gives them more opportunities for learning. We never should have tried the hybrid model in the midst of steadily rising numbers. We all should have been remote and continued on the schedule that was working. Consistency is important for the kids and teachers. You should also look at those kids who will never get to have any live instruction in the morning. There's a whole population who learn better in the AM and lose that focus in the afternoon. Going back to the initial remote schedule will give those kids that opportunity to learn at their best. With the numbers rising substantially daily, it's time to start using common sense and listening to science and metrics. There's a whole community that needs to be taken into account. Thank you for your time and stay safe. Next comes from Megan Ellington. Mr. Rowe and board members, schools should not be closed. The COVID numbers have been high and are not tied to schools being open. My kids are not pawns in a game. Make a decision and stick with it. My kids' mental health is at stake. I have not seen my kids so happy in the last 7 months than they were when they could go to school. Keep schools open. Next comment is from Amanda Lemke. Good evening. My son is in 3rd grade at Martin. He was lucky enough to be placed with a phenomenal teacher who has worked tirelessly to give him a great start to this crazy year. This week he got to go to school. He made a friend on the bus. He got to see his beloved teacher in person and experience his new school. The Martin staff made him feel welcomed and special, and most importantly, like a student. Our son said they were the best days of his life. He wasn't the slightest bit bothered or distracted by the masks, social distancing, or new procedures. Now I fear that despite a low number of COVID cases tied to 158, he's going to lose this opportunity. I don't understand why we are taking this joy away from the youngest students when they've barely gotten a chance to transition. It's heartbreaking. Thank you for your time, Adam Lemke. Next message is from Kelly Rice. Dear Scott Rowe, I heard rumors that District 158 will be full remote come Monday. To hear this makes my heart break with sadness and frustration. I have a 2nd grader and a kindergartner. On Tuesday, my kids went to school for the first time since March 13th. When they stepped off the bus, they had the same smiles they do as Christmas morning. It was such a joyous day. My kindergartner was yelling she wanted to go back after lunch and have been counting down until Friday. I understand the risk of COVID-19, and I am still sending my kids. I believe what Tuesday did for their mental health and their excitement, again, was priceless. To have to tell them that after only 2 days they will be remote breaks my heart. I, too, work at a school and know that school is a safe haven for many students. Maybe it's the social worker in me, but I'm concerned for the well-being of all students, not just mine at this time. My kids only have 6 students in the class. Please help me understand. I don't know if there is an emergency board meeting tonight and if this email is all for nothing. I'm sorry, as I'm sure you are overwhelmed with upset emails, but I needed to share my heartbreak as I figure out yet again another way to tell my kids that they can no longer go to school. Sincerely. The next comment comes from Melissa Trakes. Real quality learning is very limited in this remote setting. I have 2 students in 2 different schools, and I can tell you the students are not getting the recommended amount of synchronous learning hours. School days and class periods are ending far earlier than they should, and that is deplorable. Thousands of districts are open all across the United States safely. Even in the rest of the world, such as places like Europe, schools are remaining open as they are placing in-person learning as a high priority, higher than the politics surrounding this pandemic. I've talked with many parents, and people are losing hope and faith in this district. The social, emotional, and educational well-being of all Huntley 158 students are on the line by keeping learning remote. We are a large enough district that we have the capability of protecting both students and teachers in the classroom from this virus. God bless. The next comment comes from Dan Morsfelder. Way to go, 158. You have gone from what I would deem a world-class school district and turned it into the crying little kid sitting in the corner. You are proving that you are not as concerned about the kids as you are covering your expletive if a lawsuit hits. Let's be honest. That is what is driving all of this. After listening to last week's board meeting, it was pretty clear that a grand majority of the teachers are too afraid to actually show up and do their jobs. Guess what? Being an educator in this day and age is a frontline job. Teachers have been thrown into a position of being protectors when bad things happen in schools, yet they still show up until now. Apparently, the pleas from the students last week didn't strike a chord with you. They want to be in school. They need to be in school. They deserve to be in school. One day, a student's life is going to end because they couldn't go to school. A note will be left and it will say, I miss my friends, I miss my teachers, I can't go to school. The blood will be on your cowardly hands. At the beginning of the year, 158 was going to be a leader. Then the district bowed to pressure and said, nope, we'll be just like everyone else. 158 has become nothing more than a child crying in the corner. I, for one, cannot wait until the next school board election. None of the current members will be getting a vote from me. Next comment is from Courtney Polite. Hello, my name is Courtney Polite, and I wanted to comment regarding the information that was just released regarding students returning to the full remote schedule starting October 26th. My children started back in the hybrid schedule this week and was so excited to finally be back at school after such a long time. I have a fifth grader and twins in kindergarten. My kids' behavior and attitudes have changed since they've been out of school. They cry every morning begging to be back at school. Even in this hybrid model, they beg to be there every day. I worry so much about their mental health and well-being in this uncertain time. I'm so worried that this will hurt them long term. When I had to tell them tonight that starting Monday they would have to return to full remote, they were devastated to say the least. They need friends, they need time to be around other kids their age and learn properly. I worry so much about my kindergartners and if they will be behind as time goes on and they're not properly socializing with other kids their ages and learning how they should be in school with their teacher. Please, please, please allow our kids to return back to school. At some point, we need to weigh the options and see that mental health is just as important as physical health. Kindly. Next comment is from Amanda Sandifer. Hello, I am writing as a concerned parent who thinks that your decisions made in the safety of our kids are truly actually not, but more political or peer pressure based on the feelings of a select few. How can you say that safety is an issue with 23 cases in 100,000 people? Aren't you concerned about the tragic social and emotional toll that fully remote is having on our kids? Do you realize the drastic challenges that working parents like us are facing when I now have to figure out coverage for school changes next week and get coverage again because you are making decisions on a whopping 8% of the population? So I can go to Walmart with millions, but my kids can't get a decent education while I have paid my part of 60% in property taxes on one income, barely paying the bills while teaching my kids in a reduced quality at home. We are praying so hard that common sense and the normalcy of a good, solid education will return to our neighborhood. Please trust our president and not our governor. Please look into school districts like Paxton, Buckley, Loda Unit Number 10, downstate, led by Superintendent Cliff McClure, who have been in session since mid-August and not had any issues or minimal, and the kids have not had to be in full remote learning. They can handle it. Why can't we? This week was the first week, our kids have been excited about school. They got to ride the bus, see their teacher, albeit through a mask, have some form of normalcy. However, there's got to be a better way to proceed through the school year than riding each week with this uncertainty of whether it's a good week or a bad week. Our kids can't handle it. We can't handle it. We are not okay. We will continue to pray that your decisions are guided by the God who created us all and not on the fear of what we can't see will overcome us. Next comment is from Michelle Diversi. It is disappointing that this leadership does not advocate for our children. Students and their education is essential. Those that want to return to school should have the right to do so. If it is too dangerous to return to school, all district employees should be furloughed. Asynchronous learning is not an education. K-5 are asynchronous half day every day. E-learning is ineffective. We have gotten ahead of the curve. What is the end game? A vaccine, no cases, open hospital beds, ventilator availability. Teachers are essential. If they don't want to do their jobs, they should resign. I am an essential worker and have been working through this pandemic. It's not a choice to receive full pay and not return to work. Education and students should be a school district's #1 priority. And the last comment comes from Katie Johnson. After receiving information that District 158 is pulling back to remote learning after 1 week of hybrid, I am disgusted and appalled. Please tell me if masks and social distancing work. Why does it matter how many cases are in the county? I am so sick of this district caving to teachers' unions and dictatorial public leaders when other schools in the county and surrounding areas have seemed to find a way to keep schools open. I am tired of hearing that any of you actually care about the students of this district. And I also don't appreciate teachers telling students they won't be coming back to school before it was even made official to parents yet. How about you let me talk to my own kid about your poor decision-making before you go spilling the news to them. COVID isn't going anywhere, and to keep these kids locked in their homes is absolutely ridiculous. You should all be ashamed of yourselves and what you are doing to the children and families of this district.
Okay, that was it. Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Thank you for all those who took the time to send in their public comments. Appreciate hearing from all of you. Okay, we're on to item 6. We have the revision and adoption of the agenda. Okay, Ms. Lombard, do you have a report? No. Dr. Schlichter, do you have a, no? Mr. Altmeyer, do you have any? Nothing. Dr. Zaire? I do have an update. You do? Okay. Dr. Budzinski? Dr. Del Castillo?
Not tonight.
Dr. Rowe, you do?
Yes, sir.
I'll leave myself on there. Okay, are there any other items that need to be rearranged or moved on this agenda?
Item 16.
So nothing there? Okay, item 16. All right. Then I will make a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item 7, item 8, item 9, item 11, item 12, and item 16. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Melendi. The voice call. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. 3 minutes are up. All right. So, item number 10, Dr. Zaire.
Good evening. My update this evening is the annual salary report that we're supposed to post on our website. They are at your place for your review. So we post 2 reports, IMRF compensation, and then certified staff and administrators. So this can be found on our website. Also, we stay ahead of this game. Ms. Lombard kind of set the bar a few years ago. We're supposed to have this out by October 1st, but October 1st of 2021 is when this one is supposed to be out. So we try to get the most current information up on our website for the 2021 school year, so we're always ahead of the game. Mr. Armstrong posted that earlier this morning, so I'll take any questions on that, but it's just an update on annual reporting that we do.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Zara? All right. Item 13, Dr. Rowe.
All right, a few items for me tonight. Obviously, we started welcomed our elementary students back for hybrid week. It was an exciting week. As you heard from some of our commenters this evening, we heard one of our commenters actually compare it to Christmas, and I would concur. It was absolutely just like that. The excitement that was running through the district was awesome. It was really special. It went mostly smoothly. There were a couple of hiccups with some, typical start of the school year transportation hiccups that we experienced, some things that we worked through. But all in all, it was really exciting to see the kids back in the building. I only wish that it would have been able to last longer. Our secondary hybrid response, I wanted to share some of those response numbers back as Wednesday was the deadline for our 6 through 12 families to report what they were opting for, and to kind of share those numbers with you. As you'll see this evening, Heinemann, 59% of Heinemann elected to return in a hybrid fashion, while 41% of families chose to remain remote. 59% of Marlowe chose hybrid, while 41% chose to stay remote. And the high school, 40% of the high school chose to come back hybrid, while 60% of the building opted to remain remote. So those numbers aren't 100% complete. We're still chasing down a handful of families who are still outstanding and haven't completed their forms. So we want to get that completed, so that way, whenever we are transitioning back into the building, we're able to do so with this data and able to do so accurately. So that information is there. And then finally, obviously, the information that we share with the community this evening, we wanted to update on that. The county health department, issued a statement today recommending school districts return to a virtual environment due to the metrics that we are following that are not meeting 3 out of the 4 areas that we've been using as our decision-making model. We've issued our communication to our families. It went out around 5 o'clock this evening. That we'll be returning to that remote environment beginning on Monday. We have to remain in that environment for a minimum of 2 weeks, as that model that we follow states. In order for us to move forward, you have to live in a model for 2 weeks before you may move forward again and progress towards in-person. In that 2-week time, in order to move forward, we must be meeting all 4 of those categories in order to go ahead and move forward. So the earliest date we'll be able to start moving forward again will be November the 9th. However, at this time, we're not going to place a hard date on when that's going to be, because we need to see those numbers begin to move. But I thought this evening I would share a link with you and kind of just give you an updated Chris, it says I'm not able to share my screen. In just a second, I'm going to share that. Throw it up there on the screen for those of you in the room, as well as those that are watching at home, and you can see the most up-to-date numbers. Now we can. Right. So updating these metrics, just to share that with you, if I visit the McHenry County website, as I've done in a number of meetings in the past, and I can walk through these metrics with you, kind of where we stand currently. Let's move those that are on Zoom with us. you'll see that the red line at the top is that top level, this window, the bottom green is the 7 and the top is 14. That's the window that the county health department is recommending that we live in that hybrid model. And once we're above that, if we're above that line for between 7 and 10 days, they view that as not being meeting. And you'll see that we are currently at a rate of 25, incidence rate of 25 per 100,000. And we've been at that, above that line for more than 10 days now. So we're not meeting that one category. And as you come down to positivity rate, in the county, we're sitting at a 12.7 positivity rate. We're using the same statewide positivity rate of 8 that we're using across the state for our region. So we're sitting at that 12.7, and we've been at this rate for, again, well over 7 of the 10 days. So that's the second of the 4 categories that we're not meeting. The hospitalization, although that's been increased, we are technically still meeting that because it is stable or decreasing according to the model. And then the 4th category is all cases, and this is the one that was providing some confusion in weeks past because of when it is updated. This is actually through 10/10. So tomorrow afternoon it'll update, and we'll update through the 16th or 17th last Saturday. So we're sitting at 313 cases last week, but as you can see, it's been 4 consecutive weeks of increases for all cases. In youth cases, it's been 2 consecutive weeks of increases. So if there's been 2 consecutive weeks of increases, they start to pay attention, but we've had 4 consecutive weeks of increases. Therefore, it's 3 of the 4 categories not meeting. And that, this was what we based our decision-making on in terms of moving towards in-person instruction. We said that in July that we needed the health department to be with us, and that's what was missing for us. And we need that guidance from the health experts. We're educators, we're not epidemiologists, and we needed that guidance. So now that we have that guidance, and we've agreed to use this guidance, we're using these metrics to help guide us down the path to come back to school. It pushed us in the direction of saying it's okay to return to school in a hybrid fashion. It wouldn't be right for us not to use that to guide us in the other direction, unfortunately. It's devastating to us too. This is not the place that we wanted to be either. And I hope now, obviously those of you that are in this room and those that are in the public understand that. This is not where we want to be. That said, I also looked at the metrics for our zip codes. I didn't want to just solely rely on the metrics for the county. The metrics for our zip codes are very similar to that of the county. Actually, I'll just put that up there because I did pull that up earlier today. And then that can just be clear. Bear with me just a second. So I pulled the metrics up for our zip codes, and as you can see, in our zip code area, although the positivity rate may be slightly lower than the 12.7, we are still above that 8% threshold that the state is using, and our incidence rate is still extremely high. So our data looks just like the county data, because I was looking for the third door, so to speak, that maybe our zip code data didn't reflect that of the county data to validate. We don't have, in our 3 zip codes, we don't have the number of cases that could justify us remaining open, and it just wasn't there. So that was, obviously extremely disappointing. So that said, I think we have to own the metrics that are in our zip code. It's where we live. If there's anything that we can control in this situation, we can control how we conduct ourselves, and we can control how we follow these guidelines, how we wear our masks, how we work together to turn this tide. The county health department shared some information with us that was really disheartening. share with us that only 55% of people across the county have been cooperative during the contact tracing process, meaning that people aren't returning phone calls, people aren't answering their contact tracing questions, and the people are just not agreeing to isolate or quarantine. And what that translates to is if we're not informing them if we're not informing the health department, our health officials, who we've been in contact with, or informing them or agreeing to isolate and quarantine, then the virus is going to continue to spread, and ultimately our doors are going to remain closed, which is not what any of us want. So when I say we have the ability to control our own destiny, we have the ability to control our zip codes by cooperating with the health officials and turning the tide in our 3 zip codes down so we can lower our positivity rate, lower our own incidence rate, and come back to school as quickly as possible, even if the rest of the county does not. So I guess that's my request for the community, is that we do our best to band together. I know everyone's frustrated, so are we. And I ask that we instead of turning on one another, we band together to try and turn the tide again, and turn the tide in terms of getting our kids back in school and help us with that process. Because our ultimate goal is our students' education and our students' safety. But if the metrics are not in our favor and the health officials are telling us that it is not a safe environment and they're recommending that our schools not be open, we can't ignore that advice. So the press release, and then some other information came in late this evening that I was a little disheartened by. The press release was released by the health department about 6 o'clock tonight. Originally, that was supposed to have occurred earlier in the afternoon, and we held on to our press release as long as we felt we could. Not for our press release, our communication to families, as long as we felt we could, waiting for that release from the health department. I really would have liked for that health department's release to come out just before ours, so our community could see that the health department was, we were working collaboratively with them, and it wasn't just the school district making this decision. But coming out just after ours, obviously our decision was based on their recommendation. But it was not our intent. If people felt this was calculated, that we did this in a timely manner to prevent them from speaking out because of this board meeting, that certainly was not the case. And I hope people understand that, we obviously welcome people to interact with us at the board meeting or the emails that we receive. Our ears are always open, and we certainly have an open ear and an open mind, but we're definitely not trying to squash people's voice of the timeliness of our communications. It was just an unfortunate coincidence as to when their release finally came out versus when we finally had to push the button for ours. So
as a add-on, the majority of those public comments that were sent in were after our 5 o'clock deadline, but we went ahead and read them all in light of the fact that it was late arriving news. So, I mean, we're not trying to squelch anybody. I mean, we want to hear from people that, it's important to get that kind of feedback from people if they feel that strongly about it. So, yeah.
And then finally, before I end tonight, I think if I could, we lost a student this week.
Yeah.
And I think that if it pleases the board, I would love if you would join me in a moment of silence to recognize the life of Shannon Daly, a junior at Huntley High School. Shannon moved to our district as a 7th grader. She was a twin, has a sister who is still a member of our Huntley High School community. Our hearts go out to her family and our community of Red Raiders. Losing a student is not something that any of us can ever prepare for as educators. And pandemic aside, it is the single worst thing that any of us could ever experience. So our thoughts and prayers are absolutely, and our hearts are with the Daly family and all of Shannon's friends, and the staff that taught Shannon and her sister Samantha, and then all of her, obviously the teachers at the high school that are certainly mourning right now and remembering Shannon and what she meant to them. So, with permission, if we can.
Yeah, let's take a moment of silence, please, to honor Shannon Daly.
you.
I do want to follow up with part of, I'll be honest, I'm backtracking to the earlier part of your report on what came in is the numbers, the 59% for both middle schools choosing hybrid and only 40% on the high school. Those are shockingly low to me. I don't know about the rest of you, but I had thought these were going to be closer to 75%, 70% on the low side on that. So is there any, reason why that those were as low, given the outcry we've had, and understandably, why we've had that outcry, why those numbers would be, especially the high school, why they'd be so low?
These surveys were due, it closed last night. Yesterday was the deadline, so I don't have specific detail or feedback from principals. Some of the only thing that I can deduce would have to be the few times they would physically be in the building between now and semester.
Yeah.
A lot of our secondary families have been, I have a good number of people reporting success in the remote environment at the secondary level. A good number of people who felt that the change at the semester at the high school, at the high school level, you're gearing up for finals pretty soon. It's really not that far away. I think that, a lot of times when it's broken down by alphabet, I had a good number of kids that were reaching out and sharing, well, I'm broken down by my alphabet. My friends aren't going to be on the same day as I am, so I think I'm just going to stay remote. There's a lot of those factors, but haven't had the time to really dive into the why. But the biggest reason may just very well be the few days that they're going to physically be in the building.
For the end of the semester.
Until the semester. There have been a very significant number of emails that we've received of parents requesting for what the process will look like to request to switch. If we choose to go remote the remainder of this semester, but we want to switch to hybrid in the spring come January, how can we make that happen? And so all three principals were working on a process to communicate to families for them to sign up for that. So that's still to come, but they wanted to communicate only with those families that opted for remote, so that the number was a little smaller, instead of sending another mass communication survey out for families, because we recognize the email fatigue and how much we're communicating with people, and we don't want to continue bombarding them. But the need for that is very timely, because the balancing of those schedules is, as I said before, is a Herculean task, and it's going to take quite a bit of time. So we need to be sure people are going to have to commit probably by Thanksgiving if you're going to commit to come back in hybrid in January. So they have time to balance those schedules so that we have the appropriate numbers of students in classes.
Of course, that all assumes we can.
Yeah.
County. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Rowe? I'd like to ask.
If these numbers were to stay consistent or relatively close to what you're seeing, could that impact the model that's used to bring kids back in the second semester?
I don't think so, because the number of people that were requesting to go from remote to hybrid was so significant. I think we'll see a swing.
Okay.
I don't believe it'll be enough to say that if 40% of our high school said they want to be in person, could we just bring all of them back every day? I think we're going to have a lot more of our students that are going to want to be in person. However, if it returned to be 50%, possibly, but I don't think that'll happen, because I think more students will swap over at semester change.
Okay. And then also, on the dashboard that we have, there's that tracks number of people who have had positive tests. Is there any numerical data on the impacts of those tests quarantine-wise?
I'll have to
Do we track that at all?
phone a friend on this one.
Or I know that goes to contact tracing and stuff like that, but I'm just curious if you. What's the fallout or the impact if we have other people that have tested positive?
So Yeah, if we have a positive test, then, you know, how many people does that isolate at the end of the day?
Correct.
The nurses would definitely know that per building, what that would look like, but we're not pulling it to one centralized area, right, Jeff?
No, and I think that it varies to be able to say that correlation of, those numbers. We do have that for every one of our, situations, and that could be either for a positive case or, symptomatic. That might not be, a positive down the road, but that again, does isolate and quarantine. But we do have that information, per case per building.
Because while the numbers seem relatively low, obviously it impacts a larger population that's on a precautionary basis.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions, Dr. Rowe, related to this report? Okay, Nat, we'll move to 14 again, no formal president's report. Just echo Dr. Rowe's comments. This is a community-wide issue. Everybody's got to pull their weight. It means everybody's got to do what they're supposed to be doing, keeping their distance, wearing their masks. I just can't, I'm to the point where it's getting, I cannot believe where our numbers have gotten to. I know everybody else, cold and flu season's coming. If you're doing what you're doing, cold and flu season will be pushed back quite a bit too. But people just need to do what they need to do. Unfortunately, if you look at our county metrics, the group that's really fallen down here is the age group 20 to 29. That's by far the largest group of people who contracted it, are spreading it. Those are probably the people we have the least control over. And so we just, to whatever degree we can influence others to do the right thing, that's what we need to do. We need to get these kids back in school. As you said, I watched my neighbor across the street with their 3 young children. They were a B group, obviously, on Tuesday, and they're there at the front of their driveway with their signs. They're jumping up and down when the bus came. That's what we want to see. That's what we want to happen. That's what should be happening, and it can't happen right now. It's not going to be happening going forward because we can't get our act together. So everybody needs to get their act together and respect and do their part to get this under control so we can at least get to a hybrid mode of operating our schools. So, all right. We didn't remove. So item 15 is community relations and student outreach. Melindy, do you have anything?
Yes, 15.1, you have the FOIA request, those are in the packet. Any questions on that?
I do have a question.
Oh, yep.
Can we just for clarification, when we're looking at the report, and we're going to for just a moment, there's the column, the approximate cost to the district. Is that the value of the report, or is that an actual cost incurred to the district?
Mr. Armstrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, as noted, way down at the bottom of that sheet, if you scroll all the way down, the approximate cost is calculated using staff time times an hourly rate and any printing or other processing costs.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, and we'll move on to 15.2, the remote learning survey results, the feedback from the survey. Dr. Rowe?
All right. All right, thank you, Mrs. Melindy. So it's been a little while, but we conducted our remote learning survey of families about how implementation of our remote learning planning has gone from just in general remote learning implementation to communication to the rigor of the actual work to the length of the school day. And the data is here. And of course we'll post this on the school, on our COVID page, the web page that we have all of our other survey data posted for those who would like to run through it on their own. But just to run through this and share with this, the survey, sent to families multiple times, we've got, via email, text, as well as through social media. Received over 5,000 responses, which is a really, really high rate of feedback for our surveys. I do need to point out that it is not a scientific survey, nor is it a secure survey. And it's not, there's no sign-in required, and student ID was not required. I point that out to you because it is an anonymous survey. If a student ID was required, there would be the opportunity for someone to track down who made a comment. It's important for us to get truly anonymous feedback from our parents because we get true, genuine feedback when that feeling that it can't be traced back to someone. That we hear, repercussions all the time, even though we don't believe that to be a real thing. Not anything we would do, but we hear it, and we don't want people to feel apprehensive about sharing their feelings with us, especially in a transparent way. And then, of course, the secure. There may be the case that someone has taken the survey more than once. Or maybe the case that two parents didn't know the other one was taking it, and they took the survey. So therefore, it's not scientific. However, multiple cases where the survey was taken does not impact the data, as you'll see. Again, this is for informational purposes only. It was for our own instructional growth and improvement. And we did our best to keep the survey pretty short so as not to overly fatigue our families that are already receiving a ton of information from us, but it is very, very important. So this first one here, the first question, how do they feel that remote learning has been implemented in general? As you can see, over 2/3 of our respondents rated that overall implementation were very favorable. Another 20% saying that it was an average implementation. Just under 11% rated the overall implementation poorly. The lowest rating came from ECC, saying that 18%. One or two people. So no significant trends by level, but all in all, pretty positive, very positive feedback on the actual implementation of the remote learning plan in the fall. Second question was our district communication. Similarly, 2/3 of respondents gave high marks for communication regarding the plan, with 15.6% indicating they were dissatisfied with our communication. Mildly significant trend at elementary levels, slightly higher satisfaction than at secondary, maybe due to the complexity of having to communicate with multiple teachers at the secondary level, and the volume of emails coming in different styles and approaches to different classes and syllabi with 7 different teachers. It's certainly possible, but still, all in all, communication pretty solid throughout the district. In terms of rigor, 2/3 were pleased with the rigor of the remote learning experience we have. Of the remainder, some felt it was too easy. About 12% of the overall respondents felt it was too hard across grade levels. There was no real consistency among families, feeling that basically it was just about right. Middle school felt it was too easy. As you can see, about 20% of middle school felt that it was not rigorous enough, while 13.8% felt it was too hard. That 24% of elementary feeling it was not rigorous enough does stand out. But all in all, 65% and greater at each level feels that the level of rigor was just about right. All right, the length of the school day was the next question. Again, over 2/3 of our respondents felt that the length of the school day was just about right. Overall, you take a look at that, and even split between too long and too short. Those that didn't feel it was about right, 16% thinking too long and 15% thinking too short. All in all, even split the high school, even split the middle, and then at the elementary, the same, about just under 20% thinking that maybe it was a little too long. And that was something we heard pretty regularly from the elementary at the beginning. That, if you remember, that was a pretty common thread at the beginning, that the elementary day was very, very long for our youngest learners, which fed into some of the changes that we implemented in the hybrid schedule that we've now shifted to and maintained. That common lunch being a big part of it, as well as some of that asynchronous time to provide families some flexibility if they could not. It was too much synchronous time. too much you have to be by the computer time, and parents didn't have any flexibility if they needed time to shift away. We think that's where some of that 20% is coming from. Next question centers around technology. Overall, pretty positive results with technology. 2/3 of respondents giving high marks in the measures that we've asked thus far. 2 categories received slightly lower marks. Issues in technology, just under a quarter of the respondents indicated had relatively frequent technology issues. I followed up with Dr. Budzinski asking what some of those technology issues might be, and he gave me some specifics that they've dealt with. Camera not working seems to be one of the most common ones. We do have a model in our Chromebook. I don't want to call it a fleet, but a Chromebook. One of the models that we have out to our students that is known to have some camera issues, and we're as fast as we can phasing that model out of use. But we've had some camera issues that are almost exclusively happening with that particular model. Some microphones are not working on certain Chromebook students have reported. There have been some Zoom issues. We knew there was a big Zoom issue at the very beginning. It was not a District 158 issue, but it was a Zoom issue. Those have seemed to have settled out. Some power and charging issues that are pretty common. It seems that same model that has the camera issue has been known to have some charging issues, so we're ready to get rid of those. And then the standard keys, missing keys issues, which is always a challenge when you have a laptop-style device, keys popping off, have been some of the most common inquiries into the tech help desk that people have been asking for assistance with. The social emotional learning. The question on social emotional learning provides some insight into what we would expect to see during a remote learning period, that there are some limitations to what remote learning will provide. It was a very broad question without defining what social emotional learning is. And again, we expected that this was going to be one of our areas where there was going to be a challenge. And when 40% of our families share that they had some struggles with social emotional learning at home, I asked the question, so can you break down what some of the things that I can then share with you that are happening at each level, assuming that would be some questions that I know that you would be interested in, because that's some of the most common things we're hearing from families are the social emotional learning or social emotional issues that they're having. And you'll see that from our systems that are in place in terms of supporting social emotional learning, but I think it's mostly the student's feeling of a need to connect and the student's feeling of not feeling isolated and know they have someone. And how do we get at that in a remote setting? And while that is, of course, a challenge, it's one that we're definitely working to adapt to. So one of the most positive aspects of the elementary day is the morning meeting. I hear that from parents in almost every phone call I have and almost every interaction I've had with elementary parents, especially as we went hybrid and our schedules began to change, was, is there any way we can maintain and protect that morning meeting? Because if I choose to go remote, I really want that morning meeting starts my student's day off on the right foot, and it's an infusion of positivity for the day and motivates them to get going. So that's been an extremely positive thing. And then as you move through, you'll notice some things about, especially at the middle and high school, these weekly check-ins, which are general, like how are you doing surveys, asking some probing questions about how students are feeling and how they're doing with their work, how are they doing with this just feeling about remote learning. Is there any help that they feel that they need? Would they like a follow-up from a counselor or social worker to talk about anything? And of course, if they indicate yes, then that follow-up occurs. But even if they indicate no, if they check a couple of the boxes that trigger a response of there may be something here we need to follow up on, that follow-up will still occur, which is obviously, I think, a nice balance from our people that are, as they're paying attention to the responses and not just looking for yeses. It's imperfect. It's something that we always strive to improve upon week by week. We told our teachers we need you to improve each week in instruction in the classroom. tell our administrators and counselors and social workers, this is an area we need to improve on each week. And as we now shift back into a remote environment, that's the message that they're going to hear from me tomorrow is this is an area of emphasis for us. And how can we improve on that immediately starting Monday? As students will probably be feeling despair. And we need to reach out and let them know that we're still here for them and that we do still care about them and there's an outlet for them. So, moving on from social emotional, there was an open-ended section of the presentation where specific feedback or staff expectations, the expectations that we put out from the very beginning was that live instruction was going to be a priority for us. There was that feedback from teacher to student was a priority for us, and that teacher communication to students and families was a priority for us, and that we wanted feedback from families on how that was going. So that was the topic of what we were asking for feedback on the open-ended responses. And all of that was directed towards the building of where the family indicated that they attended if they chose to do so. And if they opted for a follow-up and there was a specific either celebration or assistance needed because something wasn't working how it should, that was directed to the building for the buildings to follow up on. There were some very specific respondents. Some themes mirrored some of the quantitative questions that we saw from some of the successes and some of the struggles. But in general, people shared appreciation for the district, while others obviously shared frustrations, the fact that remote learning is not working for some of our families, which some in-person learning doesn't work for all of our families, and we know that remote learning is not working for all of our families. And for those that it's not working for, we just encourage those lines of communication to remain open. But if your child is struggling with remote learning, your school is there and they want to help you try and overcome that, and we want to work with you to make that work. And I can't encourage people enough to reach out to your teacher, reach out to the school administrators to ask for that help, and let us help try and figure out how we can help get over whatever obstacle is in the way, because we really do want to help do our best to make sure that happens. But overall, it was pretty positive. The remote learning was acknowledging. Obviously, there were limitations, but it was positively implemented. Communication was strong. Share some appreciation for our staff members who are doing an excellent job, and our community members who are stepping up and accepting this less than ideal situation in stride and doing the best that they can for their students in our community. And with that, I guess the last bullet I should still point that while we recognize there are limitations in remote learning, what we're seeing in the survey, it does reflect the positives that we felt in the district, but then some of the areas of opportunity or areas of growth definitely do mirror the phone calls and the emails that we've received. So our survey results are in direct reflection with the pluses and deltas that we've seen throughout the time since school started in terms of the communication and feedback we've received from the community. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, just if you'd elaborate on, as however long we're back remote, like if I was a student and had a particular struggle, is there an avenue for me to pursue like a person-to-person meeting or consult or help in that form where it's not just extra help, but in-person help?
I think that there absolutely, I'm sure there could be. Dr. Schlichter, academically, if you'd like to chime in, but I think we would start with connecting with the student's teacher would be the first. If you're talking about just academic help, connecting with the teacher one-on-one, absolutely. All of our teachers have their office hours that they maintain each day. That the live Zoom remains open throughout the class period for that one-on-one assistance. Mm-hmm. That would be the first step, I think, if you need that additional help. Mm-hmm. But if we're getting to the point where that's just not working, then we have to do something else. And I think we have to leave those options open for sure.
And then I heard just more of a comment, but I'd heard either last week or the week prior, the concept I didn't really think about too much before, but that kind of Zoom breakout session that's available kind of gives you an avenue that doesn't exist even in an in-person environment. And I thought that was, to the extent it's, may or may not be underutilized, I think that seems like a valuable tool to be able to, have ultimate privacy one-on-one while still maintaining your class, and you wouldn't have that type of availability in a traditional classroom when we're, fully in person.
You're 100% correct. And from our teacher's perspective, they have the ability to still see the whole class and then work with a student on a breakout room and control that. So that's an advantage. I mean, that they can definitely, the example that we heard in comment a couple of weeks ago was a good example of a student who was struggling before a test when that was needed. So there's an opportunity there that technology can provide when the in-person sometimes can be a challenge, or you can protect some anonymity in a remote environment, which you can't always do in person. So there is the way to do that, and a way to talk one-on-one when you're in a whole class building, for sure. But the extra help, absolutely. We would start with a Zoom, and if we're just not finding that to be successful, then I think, bringing a student in for some help, absolutely. There's no reason we couldn't do that.
Could we do that for the on the counseling side as well? Do you identify students that are struggling emotionally? Is there a chance for them to come in person to meet with their social worker at school?
Dr. Schlichter, I mean, I'd like to say yes. I don't know that we've had that situation that has happened thus far that I've heard, but I don't see why not.
Yeah, we actually have, and so I think really, to be honest, our staff in many, many ways, whether it's through Zoom or in person, have really made a lot of decisions, I think, that are good decisions on behalf of kids. So whether it's actually quite a few principals have reported that teachers will routinely just say, just hang on the Zoom with me real quick after class ends, or get started early to check in, whether it's social, emotional, or academic. In person, yes, we absolutely have had some meetings in person. I think it also depends on the metrics, right? If it's something that we're able to do. I also just want to point out that has been a little bit of the basis of some of the smaller groups that we're in the process of planning. As you recall, that was some part of our hybrid return plan, was to focus on what are those smaller groups or targeted groups of students that might really benefit from being in person for one reason or for another. So absolutely.
Thank you.
No, go ahead. I'm sure.
I just have a question, Dr. Looking here, we talked about the elementary students, how they really get charged up with that early morning meeting. As we head into remote schedule, what schedule are we going with? Are we sticking with the schedule that rolled out this week, or reverting back to next week?
Yes, that we are sticking with the new schedule, the AB. The hybrid schedule is built to work in a remote environment. Families were communicated with from their individual building, their building principal, with specifics about what their schedule will look like. They are remaining in their the hybrid schedule. It translates back to remote, and they will have their morning meeting as a whole group each day to start them off.
Oh, okay. Good.
And the reason being for remaining in that schedule and why we need to remain in this hybrid schedule is the hybrid schedule is built so that we can meet all of our special services and IEP minutes, as well as the related services supports that need to take place. So that's essential in order for the plan to work. So that's why the schedule it needs to stay intact.
Thank you for clarifying that.
For sure.
Anything further?
Yeah, just real quick. So on the high school level, Wednesday still remains the, was there a late start date? I thought it was Monday originally.
It is, and Monday will remain their day where they have all 8 periods.
Yeah.
Instead of, it was scheduled to shift to Wednesday when they went to hybrid.
Right.
While we're remote, their schedule will not change.
Okay.
We're going to hold off on that change until the hybrid occurs.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But the high school families and middle school families should have also received communication from the building principal to highlight that information in case families that are listening or watching have not received that as of yet.
Thanks.
Anything further from anybody else? No, just a quick thank you to, those results. Again, while they're, a little mixed, of course, I didn't expect them to be, over the top. I mean, as we said, it's not ideal, but I want to thank all the hard efforts by administration, the teachers executing it, and then the parents at home who put forth a great bit of effort to try and make this work as best it can. Very appreciative of all that effort, because it's I know it's putting a lot of parents in a position they're not used to being in, and we really appreciate the effort that they're also making in this matter. It all counts, it all matters. So, with that, we can move on to item 17, which is the consent part of our agenda. Are there any items on consent that anyone would like removed from that agenda? Okay, if not, then I'd like to make a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda as listed. Do I have a second? Second for Mr. Troy. Can we have roll call?
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Yes. Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Craddy? Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Yes.
Okay, item 18 is our action items. 18.1, the HEA memorandum of understanding. Dr. Gier, do you have anything to present?
Yeah, just briefly, this is the MOU as we go in and out of hybrid, remote, in-person learning. The union administration got together to come upon an agreement of how evaluations would work this year, and this MOU outlines what evaluations will look like for certified staff as we move forward throughout the year.
Okay. Any questions concerning that memorandum? Okay. Then I'd like to make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between the HEA and the Board of Education as presented.
Second.
Second, Mr. Gentry. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Maiorino?
Yes.
Mr. Craddy? Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi? Yes. Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Item 18.2. Finally, what I'm waiting for here is our fiscal 2020 audit and annual financial report. Chris, you're here, right, to present on behalf of Evans Peace.
Yeah, I'll do a quick introduction. Yes, in front of all the board members, as well as the superintendent, you do have the final FY20 audit report at your fingertips. So, we look forward to getting this done every year. And Evans, Marshall and Peace and the partner, Chris Scollett, is here to present that. But I also want to, and I'm sure he's going to probably thank Debbie, as I do every year, for her work at getting the audit to, getting it over the finish line, so to speak. But, this year was a little different. It was a little different for everybody. And it was different because, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and from March through July, most of the staff was completely remote. So while the financial and fiscal team, continued to pay vendors, and we continued to process payroll, and we continued to get things done, equally impressive is they were able to prepare for the year-end audit and pull everything that they needed to pull together so that we were prepared when Evans, Marshall, and Peace did make it, in-house to do the audit. So I really, really want to compliment and thank my team for doing a a great bang-up job, a great job at pulling together the audit and getting us through just as timely as we have done in every other year. So kudos to the team. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Scala to present the FY20 financial results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Obviously, with my profession, my firm does about 30 school districts. Has been kind of difficult getting into places. Obviously, the bigger districts, many people not working, but like Mark was saying, with all these restrictions, luckily my firm's small, so we were able to get into the district. A lot of other of the bigger districts that don't have admin buildings, it's been difficult doing remote audits, obviously, because it's hard to look at things without physically being in place. So kudos to the district for you know, being welcoming, for me to come in with my staff to get this done timely, because ISB did not give us any extension as we thought they might. So the audits were still due October 15th. So I'll do a little brief summary of the audit, and then if Mark wants to interrupt or if I don't cover something, Mark, feel free to chime in. To begin, the audit went very well this year, even with the many COVID restrictions. My team and I did not run into any audit or reporting or internal control issues. There was a slight change this year with the new GASB, where we moved the student activity funds to the board side, which were previously reported as an agency fund. The district's financial profile score administered from ISB for the fiscal audit was 3.8 out of 4. The score gives an overall summary of the district's finances as a whole. This was the same score as the previous year, which obviously this score reflects the district's strong commitment to financial health and consistency. This rating has grown from 3.35 in fiscal year 2012 and has climbed and stayed consistently high since Mark took over the district as a CFO. The rating of recognition is the highest rating of financial strength. The score also represents the hard work of the fiscal department. From the board's oversight to Mark and Debbie on the finance committee, the score is prominent, especially with the large size of the district. I want to personally thank Mark and Debbie for their changeless hard work and constant improvement within the fiscal department. The district finished the year with an operating surplus of approximately $949,000 before other financing sources. This was driven by favorability in health insurance and other salary line items, the result of the pandemic at the end of the fiscal year. The district continues to operate with a low cost per pupil, approximately $11,840 per student. The operating cost per pupil continues to be one of the lowest in McHenry County and significantly below the state's average. This strong discipline has created a period of financial stability while allowing the district to support a high-quality educational program and self-fund several facility improvements. Over the past several years, stepped-up investments have been made to maintain the district's school buildings and transition them to be flexible 21st century learning spaces. The district also continues to restructure its debt. I know we're working on that as of right now, and that continues to save us on interest rates. Again, I'd like to thank Mark, Debbie, and the entire fiscal department for their hard work and timely responsiveness during these crazy times. At this time, I'll take any questions from the board, and then if Mark has anything to add that I did not cover, the time and place to ask.
First, thanks for your patience for waiting.
Not a problem. I have one more board meeting after this anyway, so.
You do?
I just, okay though.
Better get going pretty soon.
It's Woodland School District 50, and they said that I might not get out till like 10 o'clock because of all this COVID stuff, so.
All right, well, I hope I didn't want to break up the educational focus.
No, I completely understand.
I didn't want to lose our home audience early in the game here. Okay, so does anybody have any questions of Chris here concerning it? I mean, it's, you know, I've looked through it, you know, it's, again, it kind of hit the high points. A solid, consistent year that was buoyed by the end of the year, you know, costs savings in certain areas, health insurance, and well, the health, not so much insurance, it's just the lack of health, costs since we're self-insured. People stopped kind of going to doctors and stuff, so that, reduced that cost. So that was kind of a extraordinary item that occurred, but I think we were gonna be tracking real close to, right on budget and break even as far as that one. So I'll open it up for anybody else who has any questions or thoughts.
I just have a question about the 3.8 rating.
Sure.
Is that pretty average in most school districts, or is that on the higher side, or, kind of where?
Yeah, so 3.8 is on the higher side. Typically, around, the Collier counties from within Chicago, they do vary, but typically I see between 3.4 and 3.6. A lot of districts are in a review phase. It's kind of rare to stay recognition. So, like I kind of said with my little speech here, that's a lot of hard work, a lot of debt restructuring. Typically, in the schools that I audit, the reason why that their score is lower is because of their high debt ratio. A lot of districts don't take the time, like Mark does, to really analyze rates and refinance bonds. There's a substantial amount of work involved there, and people just don't want to put the time in to do it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I agree. We are fortunate to have Mr. Altmeyer.
Well, thank you very much. I was going to make a comment, not on that, but thank you. With regard to the ISB profile score, so when I did the strategic planning group presentation, I did a little analysis on that because, although that seems great, right, that score seems, I'm glad we are at the recognition status, there are over 850 districts in the state of Illinois. Well, the fact of the matter is 700, or at least based on last year's data, 700 out of those 850 are sitting at that recognition status. So to answer your question is the 3.8 on the high side? Is it on the low side? Well, frankly, most of the school districts in the state of Illinois, 700 out of 850, are actually at recognition status. So it's a good indicator, but what it doesn't indicate is, well, how efficient a district is, or do we have good internal controls, or are we absolutely managing our finances the best we can? So although it's a good indicator based on financial ratios, it's not necessarily a true indicator, as evidenced by the fact that 700 out of 850 are at recognition status, while over 70% of the school districts, are at Tier 1 or Tier 2, right, under the evidence-based funding formula. So it all depends how you look at that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, and just, again, we've done, with all this debt restructuring and stuff, and we talked about the wall, and page 44, if you ever want to get, we get these tables at these meetings when we're doing it, but actually it's presented a little bit easier to read, I think, where you can actually really see at the top half of the page when you look in the total column and you look at years 2022, 23, 24, and the debt repayment is those three astronomical numbers. That's when we're talking about the wall of debt. That's what we were talking about that we've been addressing. So we just got done. Obviously, this is as of 6/30 of 20, so everything we did was post this, but we've gone ahead and addressed that 2022 debt amount, and then we took advantage of our other higher interest rate debt. If you kind of looked over at the page to the left on 43, has a bunch of the interest rates and stuff. So we took care of about $51 million of higher interest rate debt that was in the, I think, mid-4s to 5%, and got a rate in the close to 2% on it. So that's the type of stuff we've been trying to address in the last 3-4 months that we did address. But that's where you notice it in this audit report is on page 43 and 44. again, I do this every year, the Accounting Geeks. Again, we do have a qualified opinion,
Right.
which it has to do with disclosure
Right.
on the pension stuff, right?
Right, so, GASB 75, is for other post-employment benefits. Typically, it's a health benefit plan. We've talked back and forth, Mark and I have discussed this. The GASB pension disclosures have gotten so
Yeah,
out of
ridiculous.
control.
Yeah.
It's now turned these audit reports into 20 pages of pensions, and it's now eliminating, readers, to go
Ability to
through all
follow,
this.
right.
And through my experience, every question that I've been receiving lately is on the pension numbers, and unfortunately, I'm not an actuary, so these numbers are provided to me. They go in the audit report. Do I know what they mean? Yes, but I don't really know how they get there, because that's
Right.
not my level of service. But GASB 75, these actuarial studies can get very pricey, and we don't think it's worth to do that. Basically, the opinion is just saying, hey, everything's cool, except we didn't pay
Except
for
we
this
didn't bother
extra
to do
disclosure.
the disclosure that the Government Accounting Standards Board,
Right, so,
has made it a part of, but we've chosen not to purposely because we've weighed the cost benefit of that disclosure and said it's just, there's no value to it at all.
right, so IMRF and TRS, they each have their own actuary that they hire, and then they have an independent accounting firm that actually reviews those reports that are provided to us. For TRS, THIS, and IMRF. If there's a third health benefit plan, between a teacher retiring and then hitting the age for Medicare, they wanted us to have another additional study to go out in the marketplace and then pay for an actuary. So, we just decided it wasn't worth doing. And as you can see, the books now on Exhibit A and B, you know, they're so inflated. So I know going forward, GASB is working on cleaning up disclosures. I know, things got postponed due to COVID, but within the next few years, these notes are gonna be condensed again, and some of the stuff may go away. The opinion's gonna be changing, I know that, but in terms of, the notes of the financials, it's gotten to the point with these pension disclosures that people aren't taking the time to look at them anymore. And it's kind of disheartening. Obviously, you're in the same profession
Yep.
I am, that, you know, no one's gonna sit there and read 20 pages of pension disclosures. People just wanna know if the money's there or not, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's again, we always talk about meaningful presentation.
Right.
Right, firstly,
How
no.
common is that to have this same qualified opinion with your other districts?
I'd probably say quarter of them don't do it. Some of my other bigger districts, you have to have the study in order to receive a CAFR. I know we haven't gone down that route here, and I don't really recommend it. I think it's just kind of a waste of money. But if you want to receive that award, you have to get the study. And depending on the size of the district, obviously, it depends on how much these studies cost, right? So if it's a smaller district, they'll typically get it because some board members don't like to see a qualified opinion, but most boards don't have a CPA on the board that understands the financials, right? So to me, a qualified opinion means absolutely nothing, because it's just saying, hey, we're good, except we didn't get the disclosure. I mean, to me, it's just wasting taxpayer money. I personally don't recommend getting that study either. But like I said, some clients decide to do it and some don't. That's really kind of on them. And again, a lot of business managers within the state aren't certified like how Mark is here and how Tony is as well. You know, a lot of these business managers out there were a history teacher that got their CSBO, and now they're doing accounting. So what they do is they CYA and get all the disclosures they possibly could, so there's no questions asked. What's that? No, there's absolutely not something wrong with a history teacher. Just, since you go, yeah. You were a history teacher.
Could be nice.
Yeah.
Of course they would.
Sure they would. I wanted to hear someone laugh today, that's,
I hear you. It's been hard lately, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Is there any any further questions, discussion items on the audit report? Okay, thank you very much,
You're very
Chris,
welcome.
for coming in, and get to your next meeting.
not a problem.
Get on before 10.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Okay.
Thank you.
too.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
All right, so I would like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 audit and annual financial report as presented this evening.
Second.
Second from Mr. Gentry. Can I have roll call?
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Craddy? Mrs. Malinsky?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Yes.
Passes. Item 18.3, we have the extracurricular committee recommendations. Mr. Altmeyer.
Thank you very much. In accordance with the ATA collective bargaining agreement, athletic stipends for the middle school and high schools are to be at 90% of the Fox Valley Conference in the IESA. As such, over the last several months, the extracurricular committee has met and they've analyzed and they've reviewed and updated the coaching stipends specifically for the high school. It was determined by the committee that after reviewing the middle school coaching stipends, that at this time, the middle school athletic stipends do not need to be adjusted. It seems like we are in line with other schools in the area with regard to the middle school athletic coaching stipends. So with that, as part of the memo that you have in front of you, we have recommended the new high school athletic stipend schedule, which is still set up the exact same way as it was in the past. Groups A, B, and C for head coaches, with groups AA, AB, and AC for the assistant coaches, with all of those amounts updated to reflect 90% of the Fox Valley Conference. So, it is a pretty good increase, as it probably should be, because these amounts haven't been updated in about 5 or 6 years. So, over that period of time, the other districts have a process in place to make sure that they are increasing those stipends accordingly. And we will have to address that in the future as well. But meanwhile, for now, in accordance with the contract, we do have the new stipend schedule for board approval in front of you. In addition to that, the committee had asked that we also bring back the recommendation that was on the table as of March 5th, 2020. And if we all recall, March 5th, 2020, well, that was the meeting essentially before we went into the pandemic. And at that time, we made a decision not to move forward with the recommendation simply, well, for multiple reasons. We didn't know where the state of Illinois was coming in terms of funding. We were in the middle of collective bargaining, and we didn't know where the economy was going to stand and where we were going to end our current fiscal year. But that all being said, the committee this year wanted me to bring this back to the Board of Education, because I do think there are some things in here that the board should consider for approval this year moving forward. So the very first, on the second page, you'll see a chart in green. And if you recall, we talked about this last March. We've got a couple sports, specifically high school cheer and also track and field for an indoor season. And those are two stipends that the committee feels very strongly, and the administration also feels very strongly, that moving forward, we should begin paying our coaches. Specifically with cheer, we were only paying cheer one stipend for the year, and that was technically for the winter competitive season, if you will. But per IHSA, there is a fall and winter competitive season, and we were only paying the cheer team for one, even though they've been participating in two. And after review of all the other districts in the Fox Valley Conference and what they were paying their cheer coaches, we were short a season. And so this is to get them to where they need to be. So that's that one. And on the track and field indoor season, well, with the addition of the field house, we are now the premier location to host many indoor track events. And over the years, our coaches have stepped up and provided those huge opportunities for those outdoor track students. And they've been managing essentially 2 seasons from the indoor to the outdoor. And so this is an additional stipend to account for that. And in review of all other indoor, big indoor track teams, especially those districts with field houses, they also were paying their coaches an additional stipend. So we feel very strongly that that would be appropriate here as well. So those are things for consideration. In addition, last year, the extracurricular committee proposed additional stipends as well as new clubs. And that chart is on page 3, highlighted in goldenrod or yellow, depending upon how you look at that. And there are numerous things there, from police explorers to middle school ski club to disc golf at an additional elementary school, engineering club. And so these are all additional stipends that the committee is asking the board to reconsider at this time. So I open the floor to any questions you may have regarding any of those items.
Anybody have anything they want to throw out there? So on the tier 2, you're saying, and I'm trying to remember, and I apologize if I don't remember, these goldenrod ones. I'm sorry, within the goldenrod, there's tier 1 and tier 2. Thinking they were all tier 2. These were brought before us before?
Correct. They were brought last March 5th of 2020, and at that point in time, based on the unknowns with the state revenue, state budget, where we were going to end the current year, as well as current collective bargaining, we decided at that time not to bring this forward to the ultimate board meeting for approval. So we kind of said, budget permitting on the whole thing, even the indoor track and the chair stipends at that point in time.
All right. So the green stuff you had, I understand it's, it's a lot more money than what's in the goldenrod. And from a fairness standpoint, I would concur that should be done correctly. Struggling with the other stuff, whether you should be adding on. I don't struggle with the worthiness of the stuff. Is it stuff you should be adding on right now, just given the state of things, the uncertainty of whether you can even do some of these things club-wise, and then whether fund-wise you want to be doing them. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not 100% sold on those goldenrod ones, unless I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it.
Well, I think unless we're in schools, many of these are not going to happen. So what's the...
Is that true, Mark? Right?
That would be correct.
So what is...
I mean, we are encouraging many of our extracurricular clubs to find ways virtually, if they can, right, pending, administration approval, to keep our kids engaged with some of the current extracurriculars that we have today. So there are some clubs and things that are happening virtually where club coaches, if you will, are keeping their kids engaged and very engaged, and are receiving their stipend, but there are many that are not as well.
Right, because if we're not actually physically in the building, how can we have, theater club, engineering club, Model UN? I'm just looking at the list here, those types of activities. The ski club, are the ski resorts even open?
No.
They are? I don't know. Will they be open this winter? I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. But historically, what we've done with the extracurricular committee is typically in the January through February timeframe, or March last year, January through March timeframe, is when the committee meets and they propose additional clubs that are currently going on. Because, you know, a lot of these clubs run for years whereby teachers are stepping up. People are stepping up and running these clubs without stipends. And based on the numbers of kids within the program and based on the curriculum benefits of the program, you know, the buildings and the principals and the administration, as well as the representatives of the ECC, come forward and they ask that, hey, this club has been running for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, and they're doing a great job and the numbers are there, and we would like to see this as being one of our stipended clubs. And so that's normally the process, and the process would be that if the board doesn't approve this tonight, we will probably bring this back in the March timeframe again. And some of these, maybe all of these. And at that time, hopefully we have more information on, well, we're going to be in the same situation. Hopefully we have information on where are we with collective bargaining, where are we with the state of Illinois, and the future of funding. I'll be honest, I would not want the board, by approving this now, not knowing that the state of Illinois might cut educational funding by $1 billion, you know, we can wait on this. If the board does not approve this tonight, we will bring this back. The extracurricular committee will bring this piece back. What it'll be too late for is if we do find a way to have an indoor track season or a cheer season, right? And as well, we have to approve the new high school athletic salary. I would ask that the board tonight approve the new athletic salary as well as the cheer and the track and field, because they may happen by March. But one thing is for sure is that we will, in the March timeframe, bring all of these other stipends back for board review and approval, and at that time, we will have more information.
Well,
if I can make that recommendation to the board.
can we approve just the ones in green tonight and then
The answer is yes.
wait on the others?
Yeah, and that's where I'm leaning, but.
I'd like to do that. And then if these clubs, if we open and we're in school and these clubs are happening, then we should definitely fund those. I'm not opposed to funding them. I just don't think we need to do it right now. I do think we need to do cheer and track.
Yeah, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with exactly what you said.
That's my recommendation.
Do we have to wait till March if these things come? I mean,
No, you wouldn't have to, he's saying it would no later
No later than.
than
Okay.
it would come back before us anyways, as a matter of course of that committee.
Correct, and I could make that recommendation and update the
But
extracurricular.
if say somehow we're back in person and you could do a half a dozen, they could bring that half dozen back before us and say
Yeah,
that's okay.
historically, we've done budget permitting and we have taken, that into account.
Right.
So,
But I guess going the other way, why do you have to do tier one? Like, why? Why is that a have to do and the other one's not?
well, the only reason I would say in green, the chair and the track and field indoor stipends, as part of the collective bargaining agreement, we do say athletic stipends for the middle and high schools will be at 90% of the Fox Valley Conference. And if we don't pay our chair and we don't pay our indoor track season coaches, well, then technically those coaches are not at 90% of the Fox Valley Conference.
Yeah, that's fair, that's fair. Because I was actually gonna go the other way and saying, well, what's, I guess how to frame this, being what I would call a massive school in that extracurricular participation, I think is what makes kids, have a better chance of kind of owning their experience and feeling a place to belong, where you can't necessarily go into all the traditional activities, but some of these additional, I consider some of these creative and some of them different, and just broader base of activities for people to participate in. We're taking a, $14,888 gamble on these being worthwhile, and these have all been identified as viable activities that kids are truly interested in. And I guess, why can't we approve it with the condition that it actually happens? And if it doesn't happen, we don't pay it, but if it happens, we pay it.
Well, I will leave the approval to the board. What I would note is that all of these clubs are still happening. In other words, you know, a lot of these have been happening because, well, teachers have been doing this for years, and we have people stepping up to do, for instance, technical theater club, and that's Nathan over at the Performing Arts Center. He's done that for years, and he'll continue to do that. And so the extracurricular committee and the administration of that building is now asking, hey, they've done it long enough, we would like to reward those individuals by making that an officially stipended position.
Okay.
Right?
I would remind you of the process that is established is, in order for a club to be up and running and warrant a stipend, is that you must get it up and volunteered and make sure and prove it sustainable before requesting a stipend for a minimum of a year, before even bringing it to the ECC. So that's why they're up and running, that is the process that already exists. We don't give something a stipend until it's a proven entity.
Correct.
That's why they've been around for a few years, and some of them have taken maybe longer than others to become sustainable. Some of them we have not added new stipends in a couple of years for financial reasons, so they've been waiting, so.
And I will show my own ignorance and ask, what is that last one?
Anime,
Yeah.
like Japanese cartoon type.
Oh, my Google was right then, okay.
You just didn't believe it.
You didn't believe Google?
Your
That's right.
Google.
You know, they're a monopoly
Is your
now.
Google different than our Google?
There's a monopoly now. No, I guess that would be my take on it is, you know, if they're, again, stressing all those criteria that brought it to us in the first place, I would be in favor of approving them both.
Paul, you have any thoughts?
Well, so I'm looking at the top two in the second page with the music departments, the orchestra director. I would expect that those orchestra director responsibilities continue, maybe not fully, but still continue onward, pandemic or not. There's still an orchestra library to organize and maintain equipment, although it's not being used, but to me, that's just a little bit different. And music's always been kind of a hybrid, if you pardon the expression, because it's part of the curriculum as well as an after-school offering or club activity. Whereas a ski club is not necessarily a curriculum thing, it is an after-school activity. So I guess, and I'm more
In favor of doing
pick and choose type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I probably would go, I don't want to parse between the worthiness of one. I mean, if you're
No,
gonna, if you're gonna take,
it,
if you're gonna go with, going ahead with it, I mean, I'm listening to Kevin a bit, and I'm going, yeah, at the end of the day, the dollar's spent, like you said, it's not a gamble, I mean, I'll be honest, I did not pick up on the chart here that these clubs, and they had the duration on there. I didn't, but I was thinking these were newer things, but these have been, some of these have been around for 3 years plus, like you were saying. So, yeah, I mean, if people have been doing this for several years, they think this is worthy of it. If they're able to do it, I mean, again, but that's how we're doing all of our stipends, correct? Is they're only getting paid if they're able to do these things.
Correct. But please know that we've had unstipended clubs for a long time. We've had some of these clubs go on 6, 7 years and whatnot. And also, please know that we have hundreds of clubs. We do have a lot of clubs. We have more clubs and extracurriculars than most districts, by far. And so when we paused this last March and we said budget permitting, it was also because, well, we don't have I don't want to say we don't have a great process in place. The extracurricular committee will request additional clubs and stipends every year. And if we just continue to approve and approve and approve, our 200 will become 300 and beyond. And maybe that's okay, but we have to, from an administration standpoint,
You're wanting to draw.
I want to, yeah.
I get what
Yeah,
you're getting.
and I have these conversations with the extracurricular committee, but I'm not an official member of that committee. I am the facilitator of that committee. And I let them know that where I sit from the chief financial officer seat and knowing how many clubs that we do have and how much we spent on extracurricular activities, that we have to be cautious and we have to make sure that if we're going to add 10 clubs, we should be analyzing and evaluating our current 100 plus or 200 plus clubs to make sure that are those still viable clubs? Are we paying stipends that maybe shouldn't be stipends anymore? And so those are conversations that were taking place today. And we're also having conversations about collective bargaining, about how that committee should be structured in the future so that better decisions can be made, so that it always isn't just, let's go to the board with a request of 5 or 10 additional club stipends. Let's empower ourselves to make better decisions about what we have so that we're not constantly building and building and building. So I hope that makes sense. I am, with whatever direction the board would like to go, I am fine with, but I want to give you that background.
But if I'm doing the math on these on the page, right, it's reaching over 400 students with these clubs on the page. I think your point is a good one, is we should look back on the existing inventory, and I don't know what the magic number is, but if something started at 50 plus students and ran for 4 years and now has 10 and meets once a year, that, that should be disqualified from, because there's less effort involved and less students reached. But, just thinking out loud, I would say, somewhat tied into how many students are you touching with these activities. If that fades below a meaningful level, then maybe you take action to take that away. But if all these on the page are truly reaching 400 students with something meaningful, it feels like a cheap price.
Okay. What is it? Less than $50 per
Right.
kid. So
Right.
It's yeah. So that's why we discuss this stuff. Go through it. So I don't know, does anybody else have any thoughts on that? I mean, so I would start leaning toward what Kevin said, is It's a little bit of a tennis thing, volleying back and forth. Yeah, I mean, the broader point is, I think part of Mr. Altmeier's concerns is it's going to the well with a leak is not a good term. With the horizon of finances has a potential for turning the other way, and he's just really setting what we want to be doing right now. But because the dollars are not,
But I think you do need to set the tone, and maybe now is the way to do it, is to say, next go around, we're also looking back on existing, pre-existing ones to see if they're still viable.
still the level of participation and the worthiness.
If I could, I would actually advise you to, consider making a statement to Mr. Altmaier to take back to the ECC that if you're going to consider approving this, that maybe consider a stipulation of no further activities will be approved until an evaluation process is in place.
Well,
Something like that could.
Well, that and whether they're revenue neutral. Here,
That's what needs to
if
happen.
you want adding.
He's been working on that with the ECC. It's been a process that, for a committee that only meets a handful of times a year, it takes time to build a process like that. And a lot of times, when the committee's made up of teachers that have other responsibilities that far outweigh their role in the ECC, so a lot of times that falls on Mr. Altmaier and Mr. Wilson, our athletic director, and Mr. Kemp, the activities director, and their responsibilities. So building that process sometimes is not always rise to the top, but that's something that does need to occur before we just continue to add on
Right.
All right, well,
new activities.
I think we'll vote on this, but I think the direction I would definitely tell you is yeah, we want an evaluation process going forward that looks at the level of participation in all these programs and to evaluate, and then if you're gonna bring forward programs, to add on, you might also say, here, try and make it somewhat expense neutral, whereas here, you're gonna add on this $15,000 worth of stipend, but here, you got $15,000 worth of ones that are currently stipend that aren't reaching anywhere near these other kids. That should be a little bit of the analysis that goes on there. I mean, it doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all, but it should kind of be a starting point for how they approach that.
I agree.
Is what I would tell you. All right, anything further on it? All right, so then I'll make a motion to accept the extracurricular committee's recommendations for the Fox Valley Conference grid, the Tier 1 green recommended, and then the Tier 1 and Tier 2 goldenrod recommended extracurriculars. Do I have a second? Okay, Mrs. Maiorino is a second on that. Can we have roll call?
Mrs. Melendi?
Yes.
Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Yes. Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Pagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Craddy?
Okay, the motion passes. 18.4 supplemental purchase orders.
Tony, Mr. Quigliano, can I go back 1 second? Because I want to make sure that I clarify your recommendation to the ECC with regarding the additional request by the board. Is that in the future? Is that to remain revenue neutral or just to implement the process?
To start out as trying to make it revenue neutral. If you're adding on 15 grand, look at all your programs, look at who they're reaching, but start with that as your starting point. And if they say, well, you know what, we only have 10 grand worth of programs, that's fine, but go through that drill to try to do it, give us that option. I would actually present it as an expense neutral item, almost doing, again, tiers of the ones you would drop and let us decide whether we would net add. And that, where you'd say, here, no, keep a couple of these, and we're willing to take on 5, 10 grand, whatever it is, of additional stipends. If you present it like that, then we got choices where we could be expense neutral, or we could actually choose to incur more expense.
I just wanted to make sure I had the wording right. Thank you.
Yeah. You guys agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, 18.4, again, was the supplemental purchase orders for $318,326.67. Does anybody have any questions, concerns about that? All right, I'll make a motion to approve the supplemental purchase orders report for $318,326.67. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Gentry. Roll call, please.
Mr. Guerin?
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino? Yes. Mr. Pagliano?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Craddy? Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
Mrs. Melendi?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 19 is adjournment. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn our meeting at 8:55. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mrs. Melendi. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned. Kevin, I need